I am ready to start the meeting unless some commissioner sees otherwise where we need to pause for anything else. Everybody give me a nod that you're ready. I'll go. Seeing nods, hear none. I'll open up the Board of County Commissioners meeting, the agenda for the May 5th, 2020 meeting. A couple items I do want to cover, a little bit different this time than what we presented last time. We've had some great positive feedback from the community in regards to how we ran the meeting last time. But one of the challenges was by having my screen shared during the entire meeting with the agenda showing, is it made it much more challenging to be able to see the commissioners that we're discussing, and it was a much smaller box. So since the agenda is available online, I'm not going to be showing that agenda throughout the entire meeting. We'll work from agenda packets that we have for us. Everybody should have those electronically. So that's a little bit different than what we did at the last meeting. What I will share, I do want to share my screen for just a minute to go over a couple of items related to information regarding how we're going to run the meeting, as well as the public comments option. And so we're going to make an attempt to share right now to do that. And so what I would like to do is talk a little bit about how we're going to run the meeting. The people that you will see on the screen is called the panelists. Those are the county commissioners, the clerk of court, county manager, and the county attorney. Panelists can talk open during the meeting. Our video is on. We can each share screens if we need to, but we can fully see the entire meeting with everybody. Everyone else is an attendee. Those attendees can only speak when we give them the ability to. And our host is our IT manager, Clint Shivers. And so until Clint gives someone the option to talk, you cannot speak, and you are not going to be seen on video at all, nor can you do screen sharing at all. You get to see everything in the meeting. It's just your video does not play of you. You see all the video of the commissioners that are speaking. So those are the two different type of attendees. One of the important things as part of this whole process is how do you provide public comments? Since this is an open commission meeting, we've got to make an opportunity for public comments. And as such, we're going to do public comments in one of 4 different ways. You can email a comment in. We're monitoring those emails throughout the meeting. And you can email it to comment@bakercountyfl.org. You can call the number 904-259-0210. That is being manned by a person that will take any information or comments, and he will email the county manager who is monitoring that email list, and we'll pick those comments up in the appropriate public comments section. The other 2 options is using the Zoom function, which is either chat and type in a message that I'll see directly, or you can raise your hand in that Zoom function. There's an option to raise your hand, and with that, at the appropriate time, I would have the IT manager give that person the audio capabilities so they could speak at the appropriate time. But those are your 4 options. So we'll continue the meeting. What is different conducting business this way versus the normal way we have in the past is that we will have public comments at the beginning of the meeting, and I'll give another opportunity at the end of the meeting for public comments. Outside of that, we will not be taking public comments on the individual items on the agenda for action. So you'll need to either provide comments at the beginning or at the end of the meeting. And I'll open it up for that option at that time. So we'll proceed through the meeting with using that approach. But for the moment right now, we've asked Commissioner Croft if he would do the honor of saying our prayer, our invocation, as well as the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Croft, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. I'm assuming you can hear me.
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father in heaven, we thank you for this day. God, what technology you have blessed us with so that we can still conduct the business of the public, Lord, in the public. So you're so good to us. We pray that you will bless this technology today, that you will bless all of those that are participating, or that you will give wisdom, discernment, and strength to the commissioners and the staff to do and say the right things, to make the right decisions for our county. Lord, we pray for those that are suffering, either through the virus or through taking care of loved ones, or those that have lost loved ones to the virus. Lord, we just pray you keep your arms wrapped around our county, and that you will bless as you would see fit. And we'll be mindful of where these blessings come from, and we'll just give praise and honor to the matchless name of Jesus. For in his name we ask. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
Under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Croft.
Yes, sir.
One thing I would also like to add that I forgot to do as part of the introduction is this week we're also streaming live on Facebook. So I want to make a point of the Facebook Live is we are not taking comments through Facebook. That's not part of our public comment input options. I've identified the 4 options for providing public comments. Anything that's to be made part of the public record needs to be made through one of those 4 methods that we spoke of earlier. We're providing the live feed on Facebook to be able to reach out, provide as much information and let the public be aware of the decisions, the discussion that's occurring. But if you want to make an official public comment, please use one of the methods that I identified earlier. So with that, I'll continue to move through the agenda. The first item up is the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes or requests or modifications that we need to make to the agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
move to approve.
We have
Second.
a motion from Commissioner Bobby Steele. We have a second from Commissioner Croft. Are there any dissenting votes? Hearing no dissenting votes, the agenda is approved. Next on the agenda is the approval of the consent agenda items. We have the minutes from the April 21st regular session, as well as the expense reports that's been included in the package for review by the commissioners. Do I hear any comments or a motion to approve the consent?
Move to approve as presented.
Second.
I have a motion to approve by Commissioner Anderson, a second by Commissioner Roden. Are there any discussions? If not, are there any dissenting votes? Hearing none, that motion is approved. Okay, moving on to the next item on the agenda is public comments. As I mentioned earlier, there's 4 ways to provide public comments. One is email and one is phone. So with that, Sarah, have you received any emails or any phone calls that was transferred to emails to you?
No, sir, not at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Shivers, have you had anyone online through the Zoom application that has raised their hands or else sent a comment?
None at this time.
Thank you, sir. Seeing that there's no public comment so far, we will continue to move through the agenda. The next item on the agenda is constitutional officers. We do have our clerk with us, and I'll give her the opportunity if there's anything that she has that she'd like to cover.
The clerk's office doesn't have anything at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Since I have no other constitutional officers now except for Ms. Duggar, I know she is on the agenda. So with that, Ms. Duggar, you have something here before us for tax deed applications. The floor is yours, Ms. Duggar.
Thank you, Chairman Bennett and Commission. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Now, I'm assuming everybody has a copy of the letter that I sent dated March the 11th concerning the tax deed application. And basically what the letter explained was that we had enclosed an application for tax deed as well as copies of 2 tax certificates that were unpaid, and those are county held certificates. In other words, they were not purchased by individuals back in 2013 on the 2012 taxes. Since this letter was generated in March, one of those certificates has been redeemed. So we have one certificate that is a county-held certificate that is unpaid at this time. So basically what I need from the board by May the 29th of this year is, you know, how to proceed, whether or not to proceed with a tax deed application. So, you know, that is up to you. We're here to process the tax deed application if that's what y'all, you know, choose to do. But that would require an application fee of $235, and then the application for tax deed to be signed by the board. And so as a side note to that, this one certificate that is unpaid, we're still actively trying to pursue collection on that certificate. I was on the phone with her today, as a matter of fact, and she is trying to get the funds together to get that paid. So, you know, if you got any questions, please let me know. But at this point, the ball's in y'all's court. You got the application there, and if otherwise, the certificate will expire at the end of this month.
Madam Clerk, this is Commissioner Bennett. Question for you. You said there's a $235 application fee,
Yes, sir.
and that's something that the county would pay to who?
To the tax collector's office. And what that is a, it includes a title search. And that is the only thing that, the application fee is the only thing that the county would have to pay. So we would, if you went through with the tax deed application, the tax collector's office would pay for the advertising and roll that into the cost of the application fee. And then this is a homestead, so if it goes to tax deed sale, half of the assessed value is included in the opening bid.
So I think I heard you say that we had to make a decision by May 29th. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
So what are our options here with this? Is it simply to either apply or forgo the balance of taxes that was due?
Right. So you apply for a tax deed, or the tax certificate becomes null and void.
And the value of that tax certificate is $246.79. Is that the one we're referring to?
Yes, that was at the time of purchase. Now, since with interest, it's up to $564, I think is what, yeah, $564. So the interest at this point is actually more than what the original certificate was.
Okay. Do I hear from anybody from the board, any members of the board?
Ms. Duggar, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
On this tax certificate, if the county goes through and files for the tax certificate, so the property would be sold?
That's right.
Okay. And there is currently, there's someone currently living at this property?
It is. It's a homestead property.
Okay. So we're looking at,
It would be, yeah, go ahead.
we're looking at $564 to satisfy our tax certificate. And if the property sells, who would get the rest of that money? If there's any liens, or is it, would it go to the owner?
Well, Stacy might could come in with me on this, but once the application is applied for and the title search is done, we certify it to the clerk. Once the sale goes through, If it went above the 25,000, we don't know yet if there's a mortgage. We won't know any of that, or if there's any liens or encumbrances until a title search is done. But from my understanding, excess funds, if it goes to pay off, governmental liens or your mortgage first. If there's none of that, then excess would go to the landowner
Okay.
above what, the county had invested. So
Sure. And that would be the 564 plus the fees for filing.
that's right. That's
Okay.
right. Well, we do many of these on individuals. This would be the first time we had done it on a county held. We've never done it. And we do work these very hard. We haven't had to present these in several years. We make phone calls, personal visits, but unfortunately, we're still working on it. And she may come in and pay. She has recently went back to work and she's trying to get the funds together. So, this might be paid before it becomes, either apply or, and you can always sign an application. And if I can keep you posted or keep Sarah posted on what's going on, or like I said, if it's not applied for by the 29th of the month, it becomes null and void.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recommend that we don't make any decision tonight. We have another meeting before the 29th, and this would give ample time for the landowner to make payment. And I think it's a decision we need to make at that time. I don't want to rush a decision because she might come through with the money and then we wouldn't have to address this situation. So I'm going to be in favor of waiting till our next meeting. And then Ms. Sarah, if you would, Amy, if you could keep Ms. Sarah notified on how this is progressing, and she can contact each commissioner. And then I think we should handle it in that way, besides making a decision tonight to serve this certificate.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. What is the pleasure of the remainder of the board? Does everybody agree with the recommendation by Commissioner Anderson?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Croft, Mr. Steele?
I agree.
Fantastic. We're on the same page. Let's do that. So, Rich, we don't need to make a motion to defer this, do we?
No, you can just have it on your next agenda.
We will not take action on this tonight. We will defer it. Let's make sure that it is on the agenda 2 weeks from now. If this is resolved before then, it doesn't have to be on the agenda. But for now, make sure we have an item on the agenda, and we'll take it up there if that works for Ms. Duggar.
That works for me.
Thank you, Ms. Duggar. Anything else?
No, sir. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
Yes, sir.
Moving on, we will start under item 6, which is new business. The first item up is the approval of the SAFER grant application, and we have Chief Trevor Nelson on the line. Chief Nelson, you've got the floor. All right, is Chief Nelson on the phone? I see him up there. Give him a second. He is now unmuted. Trevor, are you there?
I'm on the phone. Can you hear me?
That is fine. Yes, sir. You have the item, the approval of the SAFER grant application item. You're up.
Yes, sir. I've completed the grant already. Just needed to be signed off by the commissioners for their approval. This year we didn't go with a grant writer. I'm actually making the attempt to do it myself. I believe that I've got just as good a chance of doing it myself. And the grant would ask for 3 personnel to our fire rescue department, which would actually give us 2 dedicated full-time firefighters on shift at all times. It's due to be turned in May the 15th. The cost for this year would be $36,000 local match, and that would, if we did get the grant, It's based on, we pay at 25%, the feds pay 75%, and the feds would match $108,000. And it's a multi-year grant, and eventually in fiscal year 2024, we would assume the responsibility of the full cost of the personnel. Based on what we've already, last year with the $6.56 fire assessment increase, that amount brought in $61,000 last year. That would more than cover this throughout the whole process of this grant application. So I'm just asking for a recommendation for approval to apply.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. Unless I'm mistaken, this was always part of our plan to approach and pursue these grants in order to help fund those positions that we had planned for. And without receiving this, we may have to be careful and not maybe as aggressive with our personnel as we would like to be. So this has been part of our plan as part of the overall assessment plan from the onset, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Are there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, if there's no questions, I would move the approval of the application.
I have a motion from Commissioner Croft. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Steele. Are there any other questions or discussions on this particular item from the board? Hearing none, we'll call for a vote. Are there any that abstain from the vote? If not, since there are no one opposing the vote, that motion carries. Please proceed, Mr. Nelson. You've got the approval for the SAFER grant, and we're confident that you can apply for it and in a successful manner. So the pressure's on you now to write a good grant.
Thank you, sir.
The next item is the approval of the firehouse grant, and you're up again, Chief Nelson.
Yes, sir. As everyone's aware, when you go to Firehouse, they always ask you if you want to round up. Well, that roundup has brought several times dollars to Baker County. Well, you can't apply for every 2 years. Well, this year we'd like to apply for a grant to protect our fire and rescue personnel in the event of an active assailant situation. We know we already had a threat at the high school this last year, and in the event that there was a situation where our personnel had to go in the warm zone to help save lives, that we want to make sure they had the proper equipment. That it would be $29,000 for this equipment, and this grant would cover 100% of that. So we would like to apply for that. It would not have a county match.
Thank you, sir. We do have a recommendation from our fire chief. Are there any questions from the commission? If there's no questions, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Commissioner Croft. With that, is there any discussions on the item? Hearing none, I will call for a vote. Is there anyone that does not favor the vote, that votes nay? Hearing no opposing votes, that motion carries unanimously. Thank you. The third item is the fire rescue pending projects update. If you recall, we've asked Mr. Nelson to give us an update periodically on the status of the projects. So you are up, Commissioner, or Mr. Nelson again.
Yes, sir. The first item I'd like to talk about is the big item is the Glen St. Mary Fire Station. The plans are essentially completed. We just need to speak with the engineer for the town of Glen to get some water and sewer capacities, and so they can complete the lift station design and the specs for the sprinkler system. Otherwise, everything else is done on that. Once that's completed, then we'll be able to move out and put that out for bid. Sanderson, we're still waiting to find out if we get to keep our appropriation that's been approved by the House and the Senate, and we'll keep our fingers crossed and that nothing happens with this budget, and that we get to keep the funds for that. Tyler Fire Station, the bid's been re-advertised, or going to be in the next few days. We've got a little bit of different design than we had originally, but it's still incorporating the same idea with having a community room and handicap bathroom and everything, and some small living quarters for 2 personnel. CDBG grant for Sanderson is just kind of on hold until we find out what happens with the appropriation. I'm not sure if you've gotten the emails, but the 10A company is putting out weekly updates on our new fire engines. You can look at those online. It's 10A.com and then /production. It's the second fire engines down. They're supposed to be here June 2020. So the new wildland vehicle is in service. You may have seen it parked out in front of our station. It looks good, and it's in service. And my vehicle is almost in service. It's getting lights put on it right now. We did receive our SCBA's for a firefighter assistance grant, which the state paid half and we paid half, so that was a great thing. We're waiting to put those in service. We're going to do some training. They're a little bit more advanced than our ones we have now, so we're waiting on that. Everything else is just kind of pending and waiting to hear about grants. We have made some capital purchases this year with our air track laryngoscopes and our bunker gear. We've actually got bunker gear for all our new firefighter 1s that'll be finishing class here in another few weeks. So we're going to be bringing on another 10 folks that'll be ready to hit the street and start working for us. So a lot of good things happening in the fire rescue department, and we appreciate your support.
Thank you, Chief. I think I can speak for the remaining commissioners. They can speak as well, but I think you're doing a great job with helping continue to guide us through this whole process, bringing our entire fire department and EMS programs, elevating them to a much higher standard where there was before, both with equipment as well as working with the personnel side. So thank you very much for that effort. And with that, I'll ask if there's any other questions or comments from the other board members.
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple questions, please.
Go ahead, Commissioner Anderson, you got the floor.
Trevor, on the building you're looking at doing in Glen, are we looking at using that same building specification and plans for the Sanderson location to save us on plan design and stuff like that?
Yes, sir. We've planned it out. The only thing that may change is depending on the cost. If we have the same amount of money, we may have to go back to a 3-bay design, which would still be adequate for Sanderson.
Sure.
If we have to cut back on a little bit of dollars there, we know that that's one way we can do it pretty easy.
So
but I think that with the dollars that we have appropriated, and we'll know a little bit better as we go along with this first project.
So basically, we're looking at the same building. We might just have to make a few modifications for the funding.
Yes, sir. The only big change would be the site plan, obviously, because it'll be a little bit different configuration where it's going to be there with two entrances off the road. Sure.
Now, the other question I got for you is on the Kyler station up there. You say that you're redesigning the plans, or tell me more about that.
Well, we actually had a meeting with the building official out there after we did the initial walkthrough with the contractors, and his interpretation of the way everything was, we needed to tear everything off the back and start from scratch. Okay. So that was his recommendation. So that's what we put in the plans to just build essentially a building around the building, because that was nothing there was built to code at the time. Yeah. There's wood rot and termite damage, and so it was better to start from the beginning.
Before these go out to bid, I mean, I would like to see if when you get a plan that you have designed, is there any way me and you can get together and go out there and look at that and then see if there's anything else we need to do? I mean, I don't want to underdo it. If there's something we can spend a little bit more money and get a better benefit, I mean, I would like to be involved in that if any way possible. Yes, sir. We can do that. Whenever you get a rough plan design, if you'll get with me, I'll meet you out there and let's see if there's something we're missing. Because if we're spending the money, we might as well do it right. Yes, sir. I can send you that plan today.
Commissioner Anderson, and that's a great point, because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is make sure we are transitioning these stations from rather being just a plain place for a fire truck only, that they can actually serve as community centers as well, because the one in Kyler also serves as a voting house as well. So it needs to be truly serving more than just a place where a fire truck parks. It needs to be set up so it can serve as a community center. We're spending public dollars here. We need to make sure that we are having as much usage out of these facilities as we possibly can. So So please keep that in mind.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, that's what I was thinking. I know that's going to be a central location for Taylor and the Baxter area and the Kyler area. And I think we need to, if there's a little bit more investment we need to make in that building to make it more usable for the community, we need to look at that.
Yes, sir.
Okay? Anything else?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anything else for Chief Nelson? Since I don't see any hands raised or anything, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Chief Nelson.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all.
The next item I have on the agenda goes to item 7, which is old business. I will remind everybody while I have a chance that we do have a public hearing scheduled for 6 o'clock. And so regardless of where we're at on the agenda at 6 o'clock, if we're not finished with this agenda, we will stop the commission meeting, proceed with the public hearing, and then return. The next item is the old business, is a pending business report. Ms. Sarah Little, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you all have a copy of the pending business report in your packet. So I'm going to go over that just briefly. If you have any questions, please let me know or stop me as I move along through the list. The LDR revisions, you guys know we've been working on those for quite some time in the joint meetings with the LPA and the County Commission. We are actually very near to be able to present a completed product to you all. So last week, Laura Dietrich, myself, Rich Commando, and Susan Frazier, who's our consultant that's been working on some of this information, did have a Zoom meeting, and we've got some stuff that's going to be coming through the pipelines for you guys to consider. I think we're targeting a date in June for this to get on your agenda. So just be looking forward to seeing some progress from all of those meetings that you guys had. Trevor actually hit on the Central County Fire Station already on his pending business report, so I'm not going to repeat any of that information. The COA bus wash, we did have the final document at the last County Commission approved for that, which was the resolution in support of the grant from DOT that we received for that project. So that information has been submitted on to DOT, and we're awaiting correspondence back from them on that.
Hey, Sarah.
Yes, sir.
They haven't actually sent us the executed agreement as of yet. Is that a correct statement?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Once they sign and execute that agreement, that's when our time clock starts. And so we need to be very mindful of that to make sure that we can proceed with getting a set of plans together, most likely as a design build, because the original plans that was there have been out there for quite some time. And so once that agreement is executed, please let's keep a track on that to keep it moving forward.
Yes, sir. Of course. Okay, so Trevor actually already touched a little bit on the community development block grant as well, so that's on hold for now. We're just waiting to hear more information from that. Commissioner Bennett, if you'd like, would you like to provide updates on any county roads now or at the end of the report?
I can do it at the end of the report.
Okay. St. Mary's Cove boat ramp, we did talk about this a little bit at the last County Commission, and just want to remind you all where we're at on that project. So we are at 90% plans complete for phase 1 of the boat ramp remodel, redesign. Right now we're still in a limbo period, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. The engineering department in the electricity company is still closed. So we are waiting for that to be finalized on the relocation of the pole that's there. And once we have that worked out with the engineering department, we'll be ready to move forward with that. We're really, really close to advertising for that project to go out for bid, and we're excited about it on our end, so we're ready to see some progress to move forward. And also like to talk about the Shoals Park surveying and fencing project. I hope that the community that lives near Shoals Park along Cruise Road will be excited to hear that the contract has been awarded and that you should see crews on site in the next week or so. We're really excited about that project. It's something we've been looking forward to for a long time. And also, the Sanderson Community Station is the last item officially on this agenda, on this list, excuse me, and Chief Nelson did already hit on that as well. 2 items that aren't on this list, but I do want to update you guys on is regarding to COVID-19. So effective yesterday, all of our county parks were reopened to the public. We do ask that, of course, CDC guidelines are still met by users of those facilities. We're asking that no more than 10 people be on site and that they remain 6 feet apart at all times. There is this one exception to that. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, do you have a question?
No, go ahead. I'll catch you at the end. Go ahead.
There is one exception to our park reopening schedule. Due to the size of the facility, St. Mary's Shoals Park has been limited to the hours that it is open. We will have that facility open specifically on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of each week. So it will not be open 7 days a week. We do want to make sure that we have adequate staffing on site for the hours that the facility is open. So you will see St. Mary's Shoals Park officially open this Friday. The rest of the parks, like I said, did open yesterday. And in addition to that, we also are still working with our county maintenance department to install the plexiglass or the glass partitions in our public facilities that have lobbies, so that we're in anticipation of reopening to the public at some point in the near future. And we want to make sure that those projects are complete before we do that. So we are continuing to work on those.
Thank you, Sarah. One of the other things I also like to caveat as well is while the parks are open, we're not allowing events to be occurring at the parks. Events are encouraging people to get together and congregate. That's going against what I believe is the CDC guidelines. And so while we do make it available, we are not allowing events to occur at any of our facilities right now. We'll continue to monitor it, and once we see further limitations or restrictions lifted, then we'll open up to allow events. But for now, I think it's wise that we continue to maintain and follow the guidance and not allow events. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Anything else, Sarah?
No, sir, that's the only updates that I have for my pending business report. If you'd like to maybe speak about some of the projects that you're working on.
Yeah, there's been very little activity, honestly, recently with the road projects that I've been directly involved with, in the sense that I can't go talk to people and things for the COVID-19 thing, so I've respected that. But what I will tell you, one project that is of importance to me, and I think to the county as well, is our project in Glen St. Mary with the RV park and the realignment of the road. You know, we awarded the bids last meeting to move forward with the installing of the drainage system and things in the urban curb and gutter section. Our road department continues to make a lot of progress, but there is a considerable concern right now with the town of Glen St. Mary and their requirements for the RV park for their connection to the water line that was originally planned. And at the current moment, there is a plan to assess a considerable charge to the developer for just connecting into the water line. You know, that the developers already had to go to a point of building a package plant for the septic system, and they are also now considering doing the same thing for the water, because the cost to just connect, the connection fee alone, is not counting the actual installation of the pipe, but the connection fee alone is greater than the cost of putting in a potential water plant. And so they're continued to take a dual path right now, proceeding on both directions. They would like to resolve this with the town of Glen St. Mary for them to actually pay a reasonable fee. But what is being proposed right now seems to be clearly, it's being pursued or perceived as being unreasonable. And so you may want to just touch base with the town of Glen St. Mary to get an understanding from their perspective if you choose to. But I know from the developer standpoint, there's considerable concerns over how they proceed. The advantage of the developer installing the line, the water line from 125 all the way back into the project site, it certainly gives a much greater opportunity for additional development to occur because somebody's got to put a line in. And so if the line is there, it certainly opens up better opportunities for additional economic development down the road. And I would encourage you to at least reach out to the town of Glen St. Mary to have a dialogue with them to understand the perspective and what the concerns are. Okay? And that's the only item I really have dealing with the roads. The other projects are moving forward with the construction that's already been briefed on last meeting by by our road superintendent. Is there anything else?
Mr. Chairman, I have one question for Sarah.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Anderson.
On the CDBG grant that we was talking about for the upcoming fire station, if this is not approved or we don't move forward with the fire station on the CDBG grant, what is the date if we can file for maybe using the CDBG funds for housing in the community. Or if that's something you might want to check on for me and let me know.
I can check.
Yeah, I would be very interested, not just to pursue the CDBG funds, if we can use them in some other aspect for housing for people in Baker County. I think we need to look at that.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes, sir, will do.
thank you.
Chairman,
Thank you. Commissioner Roden, you raise your hand.
Sarah, are the ATV trails open in the park?
No, ma'am, not yet. They will be on Friday. So the Shoals Park as a whole facility will be open Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of each week.
Okay, so they were repaired. They were already repaired from the damage. Okay.
Yes, ma'am, they have been.
Thank you, ma'am. The next item on the agenda is the county manager updates. The first item there is the purchasing policy update. And a little background, I reached out to Sarah a week or two ago and had a conversation with her. One of the things that is of a concern right now is expense controls. You know, we have not really started addressing that as in a public forum, but what is very clear, and we all understand and recognize, that the state's revenues are certainly going to decline for part of this current fiscal year. You know, for me, example, I am not driving every day to Jacksonville, haven't for 5 weeks, started back today. So I haven't been buying the gas, so I'm not spending gas tax, so we're going to see revenues decrease there. I haven't been going to the cleaners. I haven't been buying lunches. I haven't been doing a lot of things here locally. I haven't been going to the restaurants and things. So there's certainly not the same level of sales tax that's being generated at this moment. So we certainly expect some type of impacts to our revenues during this current fiscal year. And so as such, I asked Sarah to please make sure she takes a look at it and sees and take a look at where how we anticipate addressing expenses to control expenses to ensure that we do not exceed our revenues for this year, because I do not want us to end the year having to dip into our reserves once we do the reconciliation back in November at the end of the fiscal year. That's going to be a continued focus once we end the year. And I don't want it to be retro that there's too late for us to do anything. So I've asked Sarah to look at it now. She's come up with some items here for discussion. So Sarah, you've got it now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's actually two items under County Manager that are very similarly related. So the first item is actually an update to the county's purchasing policy that I wanted to talk about, our purchasing tiers. And what Chairman Bennett was referring to is actually item number 2 is the COVID-19 fiscal year 1920 fiscal impacts. So I think that item number 2 obviously is going to take a little more time for us to talk about that. I think we can probably cover the purchasing policy before the 6 o'clock public hearing. If we want to do that one first. Okay, so in your packet, you actually have a memo from me and the entire purchasing policy that's been redlined with my updates. As you all may recall, the county purchasing policy was updated in 2016. Previously, before that update, it had been a significant amount of time since the purchasing policy was updated. So knowing that the policy had been so long without being updated, the update in 2016 was conservative intentionally. We felt like it would be too big of a jump to get those purchasing limits increased to what we felt were in line with today's standards. So like I said, the 2016 update was conservative, and it was a part of a multi-step approach to get those levels back up to what we felt was comfortable for daily operation. Since 2016, we did not do any updates to the policy, and it continues to be a problem for our department heads and just the daily operation of the county. So in the memo that's in your packet, you can see that there's a table there. My suggested changes are in red, and you can see that there's some strike throughs there. Basically, we have several different tiers in our purchasing policy at a department head level, a county manager level, county commission level, and then formative bid, actually. So what I'm suggesting is an increase in those tiers. I believe at this time that it would make for better functioning of our county departments. This is something that our department heads have talked about for quite some time. There's limitations to what we can do and how quickly we can get things done and accomplished because of our own policy. Like I said, we did look at the policy as a whole. Both the finance director and myself do acknowledge that there's probably some other issues in this policy that we would like to update later on, which would be more time consuming, substantial updates. But really, we didn't want to hold up the process for what we knew needed to be addressed in the immediate need, which was those purchasing tiers. So if you look in that table, you'll see that currently from any purchases up to $1,000 require a department head approval, and that's just one written quote. From $1,000 and a penny to $3,000, the department head can also do that with 2 written quotes. And from $3,000 and 1 penny to $7,500, the county manager can approve with 3 written quotes. And anything over $7,500 has to go out for a formal competitive bid and has to be awarded by the county commission. So we believe that we want to remain conservative in these purchasing tiers. Of course, we are not asking for anything that would be outlandish. And really this policy, the requests that I have submitted to you all are still very conservative in comparison to our surrounding counties and other agencies near us. So my suggestion is to increase that first purchasing tier of the department head with 1 quote up to $2,000. The second tier that requires 2 written quotes would still be a department head approval, and that would be from $2,000 and a penny to $4,500. And the county manager approval would require 3 written quotes from anything purchased at $4,500 and a penny to $10,000. And then anything $10,000 or greater would be put out for a competitive bid and presented to you all for approval. I feel that this approach is still conservative. It gets a little flexibility in our departments and just frees up a delay really in getting projects completed in a timely manner for us. And I welcome any questions you may have about that.
Thank you, Sarah. Let me ask another question here. The small construction less than 200,000 and large construction over 200,000, what does that apply to? Because if it's going to be over $10,000 and we show we're going to get competitive formal solicitations required, why does this come back into play?
So there are some specific requirements to those categories. It's actually listed. Let me find it. I'm sorry, I've got it printed. So on page 12 of the document itself, I don't know in your electronic packet what page that
hard copy.
Yeah, hard copy. On your hard copy packet, it'll say page 12 of 46 is where it talks about construction bids and large construction projects. So there's some specific language that speaks about those projects themselves. So really any construction project that we've had is going to be pretty close to that $10,000 threshold anyway. But it does go into a more formal procedure on how to handle those.
Do you know what those are in other counties?
No, sir, I do not off the top of my head. I can tell you that I looked at New River Solid Waste specifically in the city of McClenny, and their purchasing limits were significantly higher than what was being considered in this document.
I would just have a real problem with going out for a $195,000 project and just getting 3 quotes rather than having it bid formally. That's why I was asking about the limits of it. But I don't know that we've ever used that in my time here on the board. I'm not sure that we've ever used that approach anyway, so I'm not sure it's a great concern. There's nothing that says we can't go out for bids, even on those. If it's more than 10,000, there's nothing that says that, but this would probably give us some flexibility should we need to for whatever type reasons.
Yes, sir. You're accurate in that statement that we have not utilized that and since this purchase policy was updated.
Thank you. I see Commissioner Croft, you was raising your hand.
Yes, I was going to say, I'm not sure that New River Solid Waste would be one to really compare us to, because a major percentage of the impacts at New River Solid Waste are huge expenses. It's, construction, liners and things like that. And so it got to the point that it was bogging us down. So, they have a little bit more freedom just simply because almost everything they touch is major expenses.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, and I agree with that. The way that their policy, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, was broken down into different categories. And of course, those larger purchase items were broken down in different ways, and you're absolutely right. Wouldn't apply to us. So what I looked at was some of the lower level purchasing tiers and some of just the daily operation needs that they would have. I know this has been looked at in the past by the former county manager and our finance director. They actually did some research on this as well before Ms. Downing left. So like I said, I think that this would loosen some of the constraints that we have in our daily operation without being unrealistic in our approach to that.
I see Commissioner Steele, you have a question.
Yeah, more of a comment to Sarah, and a question, I guess, to you on the and I hate the word micromanage, but on the word far as the department heads and things up to that 4,500. Now I understand that with them making that, does that go straight on to finance, or does that come by you to actually for a second signature to approve that? I know it's not saying approving it, but is there another set of eyes looking at it?
At this time, I sign off on anything that's over their purchasing tiers, even, if it requires that. So we can always put that in there, that even though they have the discretion to approve it, we could put a second set of approval processes on that for the county manager. That's certainly something that could be considered. I think the biggest issue is requiring multiple quotes on such low limit items is really what our issue was.
And the only reason I say that, I'm not, I don't, it's not to scrutinize, but I just think, it's not a trust factor. That's just, like I said, a lot of times we may make a decision, it's under $4,500. We could have did something differently. Mm-hmm. And it's already done, but it might be a discussion you could have with the department head to maybe do it a little different next time. So just a recommendation on my part that at least you had not you can't do it, but a second signature, a second set of eyes look at it.
Okay.
I hate to break in here, Commissioner, but your finance would like to speak.
Thank you. We'll give her opportunity in just a moment. Are there any other commissioner comments?
Yeah, I got a couple, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
On the only issue I would have is on the anything over 4,500. If it went before the county manager, I would think that would be some information. Not that we would make a decision on the board, but it would be information we would be need to know. If you could bring that information, I'm in support of what you have here, but I would think anything that we spend over $4,500 would just be a need to know for the commissioners that we spent $4,500 on and putting an air condition in, or we spent $8,000. And it just gives us information on what's going on in our county and what money we're spending above, what we've budgeted out. And the other issue I would say is on the item where you spend $150,000. There could be a point where we do that on roofing and other stuff like that. So I can understand why that would be in there. So I don't have a problem with that. But anything we spend on major construction, I agree with Commissioner Bennett. That's a big item that this board really needs to look at. But there is issues where we're going to have some, like we did on the property appraisers building. It was $180-something thousand project. So. But we was all aware of it, and that's the way it should be.
Yes, sir. Just on that one comment as well, your expense report part 2, that's always part of the consent agenda. So that's where that comes from now. So anything over $3,500 is on that expense report. So we can alter that so that you guys could still see those purchases as well.
I want to see them, but this is me personally, I'd like to hear them.
Okay.
I know it's on the expense report, but I think if we're spending, the people's money and we're spending it on, 45 to a $10,000 range, it should be something that people hear and not just see.
Okay.
That's just my personal opinion. Now there's five more of y'all. So.
Ms. Sarah, one of the things that we may want to think about, and we can talk a little bit more about this and think about this. I don't want to make a decision right here on the fly without having a little bit of thought into it. Maybe that is something that we don't necessarily always put on the consent agenda, that we can pull that particular report with the higher dollar ones that hits a certain threshold. And let's make sure that we specifically talk about those and not just necessarily put it on the consent agenda. All those regular purchases that fall below that, it can certainly be on the consent agenda, but it gives us an opportunity to just quickly run through those. We don't have to spend a lot of times, but that may be something. So why don't you take that as for information and some guidance, and talk with other commissioners and see what would work, see if you can come back with an item that would work that helps everybody see that. Because I do agree with Commissioner Anderson here. Some of those larger items, I think it's good that we stay sensitized to the expenses that we're spending on what, because sometimes it's too easy to overlook in the consent agenda. So that may be a good item to point out. So why don't you work on that, and let's bring us back something on how you can keep us informed of those at the next meeting.
Yeah,
okay?
Certainly. And if you guys want to take the time, and if you've got any further comments about that, just shoot me an email and we can have this on the next agenda for you guys, and we can incorporate any of those concerns that you may have.
Okay, we have our finance manager. Are there any other comments from our commissioners before I give the floor to the finance manager? If not, hey, Commissioner Steele,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to let you know it's 6 o'clock.
it is 6 o'clock. Thank you very much. Finance Manager, please hang on the line. We're going to take a very short recess of about 3 minutes in order to allow swap over and a very quick break, and then we will be right back. I would encourage you to please mute your phones or your systems while we're doing so. We'll be back in about 2, maybe 3 minutes. Sarah, you can start the switch. All right, I think I saw everybody's head nod somewhat. So, Sarah, you ready? We switched over to the public hearing. All righty, folks, then I am going to close the regular session of the County Commission meeting, recess it, and open up the public hearing scheduled for May 5th, 2020 at 6 o'clock. With this, we have the first item up on the agenda is ordinance 2020-10. It's the amendment to the Comprehensive Plan's Future Land Use Amendment, policy A 1.1.10.1.b, agricultural B, and policy A 0.1.10.2 to include agriculture 5.0 and RCMH 2.5. And I believe we have our active planning director, interim consultant director, assisting us with that. And so I will give her the floor. Ms. Laura Dietrich, you have the floor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Okay. I don't think you can see me though, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I got all dressed up for nothing. All right, so we had met at the LPA and a public hearing with the County Commission some time ago to discuss the text amendment before you and the ordinance code revision before you. So there is a new item to bring up, but let's first talk about the text amendment. To just point out, I hope that you have the strike-through version. I'm looking at version that I printed out that I had staff send to me, and it isn't the one that I created. There's missing some red lines, so I'm hoping you have the red lines, but I'll point it out to you just in case you don't.
The red line is the most printed in our agenda.
Okay. The first page of the text amendment, the section's titled background. If you look at the last sentence or the last separated paragraph of background, it starts with, in addition, there is a typo in the very low density residential section of policy A110.2 that failed to include RCMH 2.5 as a zoning category that is compatible with VLDR. So again, whenever not always, but usually when I go in to try to either work on a project or we're doing some text amendments, I tend to find these typos or omissions. So I found this and I wanted to clean that up. So if you turn the page, you'll see policy A110.1B, Ag B. So in that category, we merely changed the number. It said, the last sentence of the second paragraph said, Ag B lands may be developed at a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 7.5 acres. We are proposing, or I'm proposing to you, to change that to 5.0 acres. That way, the land use category Ag B will allow for 1 unit per 5 acres, so people do not have to go through a small scale or large scale land use amendment, given the fact that we're creating a new zoning category. So that takes care of the land use part of that. And then if you look at the second section, policy A110.2, residential, that's where that an intentional addition and then a correction was put in the very low density category, bullet point number 3, where it says range of density from a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per acre to a minimum of 1 dwelling unit per 7.5 acres, which will include zoning categories Ag 7.5, Ag 5.0, which is new, we're adding that in, and RCMH 2.5, which wasn't in there at all. And the reason why we're adding Ag 5 to very low density is because it already considers Ag 7.5 down to RCMH 1 and RC1. So it was missing the existing RCMH 2.5. And then of course, with the creation of Ag 5, it also belongs there, given that they're recommending 7.5 all the way down to RC1. So that's the text amendment that's being proposed.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
Any of the commissioners have any questions on the text amendment that's being proposed? Mr. Commando, do we need to close the public hearing and go in and approve this text amendment separate, or how do we need to handle the text amendment?
We'll read the ordinance by title. However, I just didn't know if there were any public comments that had come in to Mr. Shiver or Ms. Little.
I would get there, but we got this ordinance 2020-10 is tied to that. So the ordinance addresses these text amendments. Is that correct?
Yes.
2020-10 does address just the text amendment.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to read ordinance 2020-10 by title?
So moved.
Second.
I have a first by Commissioner Roden. I have a second by, was that Commissioner Anderson?
Yes, sir.
Okay, to read by title, Mr. Commando, would you please do the honor?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Ordinance number 2020-10, and ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Baker County, Florida, amending the 2040 Comprehensive Plan for Baker County, Florida, making a text amendment to the Baker County Comprehensive Plan's future land use element by revising policies A110-1B and A110-2 for the allowance that agricultural B lands may be developed at a maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres, providing findings by the Board of County Commissioners, providing direction for recording, and providing an effective date.
Thank you, sir. We've had a motion. We've had a second. It's been read by title. Are there any public comments that's been received? As of this time, we've not received any through email, nor the chat system, nor raised their hand to speak on this particular the public. Okay, so if not, I will close the public hearing and I'll go back into the regular commission meeting. What is the pleasure of the board? If you would, are there any dissenting votes on ordinance 2020-10 as read? Hearing no dissenting votes, that motion carries unanimously. I will now close the commission meeting. I will open back up the public hearing. The next item on our agenda is ordinance 2020-11. There is some ordinance code revisions and an ordinance to go with that. Ms. Dietrich, you are up again. You have the floor.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. So if you look at the staff report for ordinance code revisions, the first page has background, which we've been through. Again, this is a companion ordinance code revision to the text amendment that you just approved. So as you know, I drafted this some time ago, I believe last year, as we've been slowly trying to get here to this point because we've got several people in the queue that have been very patient for the last year, given there are many circumstances that people have lots that are rendered undevelopable with their acreage versus their zoning district. And as we took you through that presentation, the approximate number at this time is around 543 parcels that have that dilemma. So it came to my attention though, about 5 weeks, 5-6 weeks ago, by Susan Frazier. Apparently she and Christian had a conversation that I was not aware of. And then, of course, Susan became aware of the fact that I was creating these because Christian had told her that some time ago. Well, the breakdown in communication, given that I was just an on-call and Christian was taking over, when Christian left, then it was brought to my attention not too long ago that Susan had drafted language as well. And I was not aware of that. So I asked her to send me that language so I could compare what she had written or was proposing versus what I had written. And they're different. And I want to tell you how they're different. The one that I've already presented to you in previous meetings is what's before you. And that contemplates creating a new category. So you would have Ag 20, Ag 10, Ag 7.5, Ag 5.0, and then you drop down into your RCMH 2.5, 1, RC1, and RC.5, and so on. So you furthermore, you not only contemplated allowing for maximum density of 1 dwelling unit per 5 acres up to that 7.4 threshold because we have an Ag 7.5. So it allows for that gap. People with between 5 and 7.4 acres would now be able to develop one structure. Furthermore, we went into permissible uses by special exception. I had proposed 4 to eliminate: slaughterhouse, borrow pit, mining, and feedlot. it was decided that borrow pit and mining didn't qualify anyway, so they should have never been put in given their minimum acreage to allow for those uses. So that was an automatic out. Slaughterhouse, you determined most likely would not be appropriate as a special use at all because of the size versus the layout of acreage and setbacks, and the definition of slaughterhouse and how far it needs to be from neighboring properties. So that you took that one out. The only one you left in was feedlot, but that's based on a site plan review to determine whether or not it's appropriate for placement and location. So that's where we left that ordinance code revision. However, now I'm going to, I've had several conversations with Sarah and Rich and Susan. We actually had a conference call the other day. And so I've been asked, she feels very strongly that she wants me to propose to you what she has drafted so that way you can contemplate her point of view. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to let you make the decision and we can talk through it. What she's proposing has a different kind of spin on it. The intent that she's proposing is to not create a new zoning district called Ag 5.0. It's to, in fact, eliminate Ag 7.5 and just call the district Ag 5 and have no 7.5. Therefore, anything between 5 and 7.5 acres would be covered with one district. So that would mean one dwelling unit between 5 to 7.5 acres. Therefore, the future land use map would have all of these parcels that say 7.5 and some that would say 5.0. But nonetheless, there'd be one category that would cover this range of maximum density for that acreage range. Furthermore, she has proposed that there be a lot width restriction that exceeds what's currently allowable. Currently, in the code for Ag 7.5, it says minimum lot requirement width is 200 feet. Well, if you look through the zoning code and you start with the least intense and dense use, which is Ag 20, that's got a lot width of 400 feet. But here's what's interesting. If you look at Ag 10, Ag 7.5, and RCMH 2.5, the three existing thresholds that are of the less dense land use categories and zoning districts, they all say 200 feet. So by proposing that this Ag 5 have 400 would be double, 200% higher than the threshold before it and below it. So I don't understand where that came from. She has drafted saying lot width 200 feet, but for any parcel created after May 19th of this year, they all have to be 400 feet when direct access is provided to a county or state collector or arterial road, including all family lots, temporary lots, medical hardships, and homestead divisions. Now, I've asked the question. I don't have the answer. I'm not sure if she believes it's because there may be multiple lots with the same owner, but nonetheless, whether it's the same owner or not, homes can still be developed at a certain density rate. So to me, it doesn't really matter if it's the same owner or not, because density is density. And then the last provision she added let's see. She talks about single driveway crossings per residential lot across county roads and travel lanes. So again, she's restricting widths and driveways for this category only, not the category below it and not the category above it. But so that I just thought that was interesting. So it's up to you to make the decision if you want to have one category that covers a range from 5 to 7.5. It's also up to you to decide whether you want to start creating a new completely inconsistent lot width that isn't consistent with the zoning districts on either end of it, higher or lower, and driveway restrictions. I can tell you in my professional opinion, zoning codes, the best codes, the most well-written.
Hey, Laura. My understanding is Susan's recommendation is to go forward with the ordinance that we have today, not bring in what Laura's talking about is some of the things that were discussed in the joint workshops between the LPA and the commission.
Right.
I think Susan's recommendation at this point is just that she felt like the new category shouldn't have a maximum size, and her comment was that none of the other future land use categories had a maximum either.
Okay, well, actually, every zoning district has a maximum density per the acreage. They don't have a range. This would be the only category that proposes a range. So, and it would be the only category that covers not just the range, but would then eliminate a district by conjoining them. So, again, you can consider that. You'd have a 20, a 10, and then a 5. The 5 would have a range. 20 has 1 dwelling unit per 20. 10 has 1 dwelling unit per 10. Now, all of a sudden, you'll have Ag 5 that's 1 dwelling unit per 5 to 7.5. And furthermore, I asked her, I said, here's what concerns me is inconsistent code, but also that we have put on special restrictions on the Ag 5 zoning district where there's special uses by exception that wouldn't be allowed in Ag 5 that are currently allowed in Ag 7.5. And then her response was, well, then you can go ahead and state that in the special uses by exception area.
Laura, this is James. Let me interrupt for a minute.
Yeah.
I'm a little concerned with how this discussion is going. Is there a particular reason why this needs to have action taken tonight on it?
The Ag 5.0 has been, that's been a year-long effort that we've had people waiting for.
That's fine. My question is there a purpose or this shall take action tonight for this public hearing? Or is it going to be a problem if it delays 2 weeks?
The purpose is that we've had a number of different landowners that have been waiting for this for 1.5 years. Now, even Susan's recommendation was we can pass this. There's still some other components that Susan's putting together from those joint meetings, and we can address this then. That'll help clear up any sort of confusion.
I have a concern with the way this is being presented. Unless it's something critical for tonight, I want to defer this item to the next meeting till we can resolve this at a county level with what is appropriate to come forward with recommendations. We should not be sitting here as a board hashing out recommendations from 2 different planners on a particular item. We should reach consensus. The planner should, before it comes before this board, for making a recommendation. And as such, unless it is something critical, I would like to defer this item. So unless somebody can speak up and tell me why it's essential that it can't wait for 2 weeks, I'd like to do that. Sarah, I see you raising your hands.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. So this is part of what we discussed on the pending business report. So Susan, Frazier, myself, Laura, Dietrich, and Rich all had a conference call last week. Unfortunately, through all of this process, it was not known until late in the process that both Susan and Laura were working simultaneously on something that was very similar. So what Laura has on the agenda tonight, I feel is necessary. We have a list of people who have been waiting for about a year to make progress on 5-acre tracts. We have people that are ready to build homes, that are ready to maybe move on, mobile homes. We've got family lot applications that are all based on what you guys have presented before you tonight. So what my recommendation was when we talked last week, and I apologize, I know this all happened just right before Laura got on the phone, so I'm kind of hearing this as you guys are hearing it. But so my recommendation last week when we spoke was let's move forward with what Laura has presented for you all tonight. It solved the immediate need of those residents in Baker County who cannot move forward with a 5-acre parcel right now. We know that there is a more in-depth review, and I would like to look at that a little further at a staff level, and that is part of what we're going to present to you all in June. And there may be some additional small revisions to what Laura is saying Susan's recommendations are, but I feel that portion of this whole project can wait until we move a little farther along in the process. But the ordinances that are before you tonight, 2010 and 2011, solve an immediate need for those citizens in Baker County. And I would recommend that you guys move forward with those tonight as presented, as Laura has worked on those. And that'll give staff a little more time to dig in depth to the additional information that Susan is requesting, but it doesn't delay or prohibit anybody from moving forward with building a home or moving a mobile home on. Like I said, we've had people that have been waiting for about 18 months on these projects.
And with all due respect, I appreciate that perspective, but on the same token, I don't want to approve something tonight that's turned around and we're going to be making modifications to that same thing in just a few weeks or a month or so afterwards. that now all of a sudden somebody new is going to be pointing back and saying, hey, I can't do what you letting them do. We start setting precedents. This should be something that should be resolved before we go through and approve something up front. And if this is the pleasure of the board of what you'd like to do, but I am not going to be willing to move forward with this. I will vote against it. It take 2 more weeks to resolve these issues. It should have been resolved before it was brought to the board tonight. Okay, it needs to be resolved, and then in 2 weeks, take a vote on it. Board wants to proceed. I'll certainly recognize that, but at this point, I shouldn't be hearing 2 different planners' recommendations on 2 different things and all the conflicts between them by the time it comes to this board, and the board being said, well, what do you want to do? 2 professional opinions ought to be able to be worked out before it is presented to this board. So I'm glad to entertain that, but I think the details as simple as this: do we want to move forward with this amendment tonight or not? If so, I'm glad to entertain a motion to approve ordinance 2020-11.
Yes, sir. And just to follow up on that, Mr. Chairman, I completely agree with you. Like I said, I was under the impression that our conference call last week solved these issues, but obviously if there's been something else that's been brought to light by our consultants, and that's fine. We can, we want to make sure that we do it right, of course, but we don't want to delay these projects any longer than we have to for people that have been waiting a significant amount of time for that.
I fully agree with not delaying, but I also don't believe in creating our own problems for a 2-week period.
Right.
And it happens too often. I've had too many phone calls recently with people saying, well, why can't I do that? You let them do that. Well, and we always have a reason why it's a different circumstance or something different. And I'm concerned with the lack of consistency. And as such, this needs to be addressed once and be resolved once, not do something now that in a month or 2 is going to be changing it again. So I'd much prefer to resolve this, have it 2 weeks to resolve it, and come back with one recommendation that everybody can live with. Mr. Anderson, I see you want to speak.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I feel the same way. I don't feel like we should move forward with an item that there is some conflict between staff as far as resolving it. I think it needs to be fixed before it's brought before the board for us to make tonight. I mean, it's really hard to make a good decision when you got 2 conflicting information coming from 2 different planners that work for our county. So to me, I'm going to recommend that we table this thing until staff can get together and they can get these issues resolved and bring them back. Because when I approve something, I want to make sure I'm approving the right thing. And as of right now, from what I'm hearing, I'm not so sure that we're hearing the right thing. I agree with what's been presented before us today, but I do remember being in the meeting where some of these other items was discussed on the 5 and 7.5 acre tracts as far as driveways and stuff like that. So I think it's very important some of that information is presented to us before we can make a good decision. I hate it that the people's waited a year for this to come before us, and we're having to table it again. But I also know those same people expect us to make an accurate and a good decision, and we need all the right information to be able to do that. And as of what I'm feeling now, I don't feel comfortable making that decision with what I'm hearing.
That's what I recommend. Mr. Roden, you would like to make a comment. You're recognized.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think the confusion came from a lot of our discussion in our LPA and Baker County Commission meetings, joint meetings. I think that's where a lot of the confusions has been. And so I'm all in favor of waiting till we can come together with a definite plan, because that's what all of our discussion was about too. So I'm in agreement with that. I just wanted to say that.
Thank you, ma'am.
And given the direction of the board, there just would need to be a motion, because this is a public hearing, a motion to defer to a time and date certain.
Wait, may I speak, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Laura, you're recognized.
Okay. When I had presented my drafts in the LPA in the first BCC meeting, there was no discussion about any language in addition to that from any workshops that you all had. So that's what actually kind of caught me off guard when Susan had drafted something and said that you all had talked about it in numerous meetings. So I guess moving forward, I'm going to work with Rich and Sarah, because there's 2 different, it's similar, but there's 2 different approaches to this. And other than having the direction if we can internally come to a resolution about this, but if there's not, I mean, I was prepared tonight to present what I was going to present, which is what I drafted. At the last minute, I was asked to present hers as well, which I didn't think we were going to do, but then I was asked to do that.
Laura,
So,
Laura,
I just want to know who's going to make the final decision.
Laura, I'm confident that we can have a discussion outside the county commission meeting to reach a consensus on what we believe is best for the county and then present one unified front to the board. And I think at a staff level that can be done. And I am glad to participate in that discussion to help lead to a unified front so that we can move forward. There has been a number of different discussions. There were discussions with Ms. Frazier during our meetings, our LPA meetings, or joint meetings with the LPA. But from our perspective, we thought we were moving forward in a consistent manner. So for it to be presented tonight that there's inconsistencies with the two directions that we've given, I think we need to work through that and then have one recommendation come back to the board. And I'm glad to assist in that. We can certainly schedule an offline meeting to try to help resolve that and give clear direction. Because I understand, I can certainly respect and appreciate the frustration level to have something changed on you at the last minute, but I think it's incumbent upon staff to make recommendations to the board in a unified front, and that's not occurring tonight. So we can have an offline discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, and with that being said, I would like to take a motion to, Commissioner Steele, do you have a comment?
No, I was gonna make a motion.
Okay, I would like to entertain a motion to defer ordinance 2020-11 to the next commission meeting, which I think is scheduled for May the 19th, and be on a public hearing at that time. I'm glad to take a motion for that.
Make a motion to move ordinance 2020-11 to the next commissioner meeting on you think Commissioner Bennett said 19th?
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Steele. I have a second from Commissioner Anderson. And so with that, are there any other discussions? If not, I'll close the public hearing. I'll open up the commission meeting. All in favor for the postponement of that, for the motion that's put on the floor. If you're in favor, or if you oppose that motion, please signify by saying aye. Hearing no opposition, that motion is carried, and that is actually deferred until the next commission meeting. And that was the last item that we had in the public hearing. So I do not believe we need to return back to that. I would ask Sarah if you would set up a conference call if we can in the next day or so. Or let's me and you talk. We coordinate with Laura and Susan to figure out what's the best way to move forward on this. Okay.
Yes, sir. We'll do. You and I can talk offline and we'll schedule something.
Will do. Not a problem. Thank you, Laura. Do you have anything else? You have anything else that you have before us that you need to cover?
I do not.
Thank you, Laura, for your help. I appreciate that. Okay. And we'll work this out and have something back before the meeting, next meeting. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye. Okay. With that being said, we are back in the regular commission meeting, and I am going to return back to the purchasing policy discussion that we were having because I don't think we ever took action on that. So with that being said, we are back on the agenda item number under county manager, the purchasing policy item number 1. And that's, we left off with discussion about who should be advised. And I think what I understood was even for department heads, raising the limits to 4,500. While we can do that, because it certainly helps out with the quotes, we'd also like the county manager to sign off on that as well. But they only have to, the quote adjusts how many quotes we have to get by raising the limit. So there's a positive to that. Raising the limit for the county manager to $10,000. Again, that led into discussion that we want to see a different change in how we are presenting that information here at the board for all those major expenses. And so that I think can be resolved as well. And we did have a bit of discussion on my question regarding the small construction projects that are less than $200,000, but I think we all agree to leave that as it is today because it gives us the required flexibility that we may need, and we certainly can go out for formal bids if we need to, but it gives us the ability to get quotes if necessary. And so that was where we was at today, and I certainly welcome any other comments from the board.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I believe Ms. Cheryl Ruiz, our finance director, is holding to speak as well. She had some comments.
Thank you very much. You are correct. I was about to recognize Ms. Ruiz whenever we had the, realized it was time certain for 6 o'clock. And as such, Ms. Cheryl, are you on the line?
I am here, sir.
All right, our finance director is on the line and you have the floor.
I just wanted to comment, but Mr. Chairman Steele kind of suggested for a secondary backup.
Say that one more time.
Sorry, I echo my side. But I just wanted to point out in our purchasing policy, there are secondary measurements for the finance director to collect these POs, to collect the quotes, to check the budgetary amounts. And so that was where our secondary threshold was and where we crossed off everything. And then if there was any disputes, like on page 26 of the purchasing policy, it states that we would all code together, agree on the purchase, or come to the board. Additionally, several years ago, that's how part 2 of the expense report came about. Anything over $3,500, y'all agreed that those needed to be pointed out to you. So we made it up a separate spreadsheet. We asked if we wanted it in the live meeting, but we all said that we'd put it in the consent items. If we would like to move them, just please feel free to give us direction and we'll move forward.
Thank you, ma'am. And I think what we would like to do is as a task, Sarah, to at least have that conversation on how we'd recommend with moving forward with those items and work something up, bring back to us for next week on how, next meeting on how we will present those, whether we keep them on a consent or do them as a separate line item. That certainly can be brought back to us how we do that. Any other questions on the proposed changes to the purchasing policy as we have it here? If not, I'll certainly entertain a motion to either approve, and if I don't get a motion in a second for a vote, then that means that does not move forward.
I make a motion, we approve it as presented.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Anderson. I have a second from Commissioner Steele on making the approving the changes to the purchase order policy as recommended with the additional to the department head, the county manager also signing off on it, as well as making sure that we address the item related to how it's presented for purchases over $4,500. I have a motion. I have a second. Is there any other discussion? If none, we'll call for a vote. If there's any that does not agree with the motion, please signify by saying aye. Hearing no nays, that motion passes unanimously. So we look forward to hearing that back next week with the one outstanding item here of giving us an update on recommendations on how we present those larger purchases. All right, the next item is the COVID-19 fiscal year 2019-20 impacts, and this is the one that I was discussing earlier. And so, Sarah, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I had to unmute my mic. So there is a memo in your packet regarding some of the concerns that we do have regarding COVID-19. And Ms. Ruiz is still on the line. I believe her mic is muted for the moment, but she is available. I think this will be a joint effort between Ms. Ruiz and myself. So like Chairman Bennett explained to you all before we started this portion, he and I did speak last week, and obviously each one of you have expressed the same kind of concern that we don't know what types of revenue shortfalls that we may see in the coming months or for next fiscal year. But we do anticipate from what we're hearing that we are going to have some fiscal constraints because of everything that's going on with COVID-19. Like I said, at this point, it is very hard to forecast what those shortfalls will be, but it is a good idea to go ahead and start preparing for those. So in the memo that is in your packet, there are 4 different items that are for your consideration. Just at a high level overview of what we could do now to go ahead and slow down some of our spending on what I would like to call as non-mission critical items. So that's just something for you guys to consider tonight. In that memo, for anyone that may be listening that doesn't have access to that, I will let you know what those are. So the first item that was presented for your consideration was requiring county manager approval on any purchase over $3,500. Which would be anything that is also considered non-mission critical. So our department heads, it would give them the opportunity to really take a second look at the requests that they're making, and just really determine, can we hold off on this? We don't want to say we're going to cancel that project, but we want to make that focus that we're going to delay it for now. Can we make that purchase maybe later in the fiscal year when we have a better idea of what our funding is going to look like, or possibly hold off until next fiscal year? So like I said, that would be for purchases over $3,500. In addition to that, we're also going to propose a hiring freeze on any position that's not deemed necessary. So in that memo, you'll see that only positions critical to public health and safety or deemed necessary by the Board of County Commissioners will be filled until further notice. So that doesn't limit us from hiring those positions that we feel are necessary to move forward. And it does give you the flexibility for us to bring those requests to you, similar to what we did before when we had the hiring freeze. Before we advertised any position, we brought that to you all and you had to approve it as necessary. And that's very, very similar to what we would be doing now. In addition to that, we also would request that we delay any contracts. Departments should delay entering into any new contracts unless they support mission critical projects, or they are grant funded or deemed necessary by the Board of County Commissioners. Further, departments should also consider terminating or reducing any contracts that they feel are no longer essential. And the fourth item there is delaying capital purchases or projects. The department should begin delaying any new capital projects or purchases of equipment unless mission critical or deemed necessary by the Board of County Commissioners. So in these items that I have presented to you all tonight, it is not a necessary spending freeze like we've seen in the past. It does give you all the flexibility. It gives our departments the flexibility to present any items that they feel are mission critical to moving forward. So it's not an ultimate no to anything over $3,500, but just gives us that secondary look at those purchases and really focus on those a little more on whether we can delay those for a period of time or not. You're still muted, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. A couple items here to kind of follow up on. We need to be very careful when we start deciding who is deciding what's mission critical, okay? Because this is gonna have to be embraced by everybody, because, you know, my copier breaks, I gotta go buy another copier because it's mission critical, I gotta have it. Well, I can see where we have to make certain that everybody understands the nature of what we're dealing with. There is going to be a shortfall in revenues. And so to say, well, it's in my budget. Well, your budget was all prepared based on a projected revenue as well. And the revenues aren't there, so the budget can't be spent. There's got to be reductions in expenditures this current fiscal year, or we will not meet budget. We will exceed our revenues, all right? And we will be having a cleanup resolution to adjust it. And the only place the money will come is from out of the reserves. And that's going to be a concern for me. So this concept of making sure it's mission critical, there needs to be a specific focus on what is determined to be mission critical, because not everybody has the same perspective on what is mission critical. Right now for the hiring freeze, it's not technically a hiring freeze, but it's essentially is this. What I would like to say is if there is a position becomes vacant, I think the board needs to be aware of that before it's advertised to be filled. Because it's not just the salaries that you're dealing with, it's all the benefits that go along with that we pay. And if there is, there may be some time that we can do without a position. It could be eliminated completely, but it also may be just delayed in filling it back and hiring it back. And so I think if there is a vacancy, then we need to be able to address that before it is advertised to see if it needs to move forward. Capital contracts related to capital purchases, again, depending on what that is, just because it's in our budget don't mean we should proceed with it. And again, any major capital purchases should be considered to be delayed and rebudgeted for next year. We are starting that budgeting cycle now. And reality is it's not a big change if we defer it to next fiscal year, because that's October 1. We're not delaying a year. We really delay it only 6 months. And I think we need to look very closely at deferring any of those type of projects. I would just tell you, in my line of work, I have done exactly these same things now. We have delayed many construction projects, a number of those until the new fiscal year, and I'm rebudgeting them in the new fiscal year because of our concerns. And I think we need to do the same things here to ensure that we do not exceed the revenues. We are going to come in under budget. Our revenues will come in less than what was budgeted. So I would encourage us to do each one of those with those caveats. And I welcome the other comments from the board.
Mr. Chairman, I would agree. I think that we need to be more conservative with the issues that's put before us with the virus, but also need to know that we need to look at our EMS, police, and the really critical jobs. I'm going to be in support of keeping those moving along. And also, to me, the road department is in a whole different caveat. It's funded strictly, and I know that it's going to be fit by the fuel taxes and stuff like that. They're going to be down some, but I'm telling you, in the road department, it's hard enough to get jobs, to fill those jobs. That would be an item that I'm going to be looking at if it's brought before us, to go ahead and get those jobs filled. But we don't want to get into a point where we're suffering on our roads and the garbage and stuff like that piling up on us because we ain't got people to run those trucks or run that equipment. Some of the other items, yes, I do agree that those should be brought before the board, and we need to look at those before that we move forward with those. But if there's anything that's got to do with critical infrastructure or anything that's real critical, I think we really need to look at moving ahead with those items. But I would support all the stuff that's brought before us now. Just those few items I would have more of a concern with. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson. Other commissioners? I see no hands. I will respond as well. Commissioner Anderson, I appreciate your perspective on that, and I would agree. Any of the EMS activities, anything related to emergency services and preparedness, that I would fully agree that needs to begin filling immediately. I think any vacancies in the road department, I think that should come for us because we meet every 2 weeks anyway. A week and a half delay at most I don't think is going to create a significant delay. It would take almost that long to get everything packaged ready to advertise. But I agree that we got to be careful on how we do that. I'm certainly not saying that we wouldn't move forward with it. I'm just saying it needs to be brought to the board to see at that time if it's something that we believe is critical.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Croft, you're recognized.
I'm in agreement. We're going to have to put the brakes on some of the spending in this fiscal, but I'm also concerned about as we prepare for next fiscal year. I think that's where we may really feel the biggest impact is on the loss of revenue sharing from the beginning. And so I think we need to have county staff beginning to prep themselves for, for lack of a better term, a zero increase budget, because we don't know how this thing's going to hit us, and we're all shooting in the dark in this thing. But I think there will be some impact, and we might as well be ready from the beginning.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. I will tell you this, my budget for my work, we had to start off with about a 25% reduction from current year. We've already had to make sacrifices now. We've already also dealt with the side of not hiring positions and things. I agree that we're going to have some impacts, and I think that we need to be focused not just on a zero budget. It may need to be declined from current year, but we start the budget cycle. So now it's going to be really important to focus on what our true expenditures are. But let's if I could, let's bring us back to the current physical impacts with the approach that we're talking about for current year. We're trying to maintain the remainder of the current year. Sarah has put forth some recommendations, and we've had some conversations on it. I would agree that any, on the item 2 for vacancies, it's not necessarily be a hiring freeze well, let me say it this way. I'd suggest that there's a hiring freeze on everything except for emergency responses, whether of any of those, but immediately have any vacancies at the very next commission meeting for us to say yay or nay on how to proceed. Okay, that would be the clarification I think that would probably be, my perspective, a good compromise with Commissioner Anderson.
I would agree with that, Mr. Chairman. Also, we need to look at the legislative issues that's going to be handing down. I think might be some funding for local and small counties and smaller states. So that needs to be something that's on the forefront of our staff. So we need to keep, I'm going to be looking for it through the state, but the state's going to be hit just like we are. So we're going to have to be looking through federal funding to maybe recoup some of our money. And this, because this is something that it just happened. It's not nobody's fault.
That's right.
But it's just something, but we need to keep our eyes open on some of that funding that might be coming down from the federal government. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair, I know with Commissioner Anderson, I agree with him on that. Definitely will be on the lookout. And if I'm not mistaken, I could be, that the funding that the state's already getting, most of it's restricted, I think, to law enforcement and emergency management service. So, but we still would fall in that category. Sarah, I'm sure that our sheriff and everybody else be, Trevor be looking for those things. But that's something that it was actually said it was for, one of the first phases would be for wages for those functions.
Thank you, Commissioner Steele. Any other items there? Sarah, this isn't shown as an action item or anything. Is it, we need to take any action on this or just give you direction? I think this is more just information and give you some direction. I don't think we need to take action on it. So with that, I think the direction is proceed with those recommendations that you put forward with a couple of items that we've discussed to make sure that we're trying to maintain that. Please encourage your department heads to watch that, and I know they will. I think we're going to have a little bit of tough times getting through some of this, and so we're going to need their help. They're the ones on the front line. They know how to run their shops better than we do. And so this is not our attempt to micromanage at all. It's just we've got to do our due diligence now, and we need their help in order to be successful with this. So please encourage them to pay very close attention to any spending that's not necessary, and please work to try to reduce that if possible. Okay?
Yes, sir. Will do.
Sarah, do you have anything else from the county manager? Any other items that you want to cover?
No, sir. I believe we've covered it all.
Fantastic. Thank you, ma'am. The next item up is the county attorney. Mr. Commando, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No additional report tonight.
Thank you. The next item is the commissioner comments, and I'm just going to go on the order that they pop up on my screen. And Commissioner Roden, you happen to be the first in my top left of the Hollywood Squares. Take your mute off.
I said that's what we look like, the Hollywood Squares. Anyway, I really don't have anything personally, but I did want to bring up discussion about possibly making Sarah our manager, our county manager, not interim county manager, but our county manager. I feel like we're not having success in a lot of our areas of finding somebody, and she has proven that I think she can do the job. She's had a lot of things come up since she's been interim, and I think she's done a great job, and I would be very much in favor of that.
Thank you, Commissioner Roden. One of the things I had on my list that I was going to bring up when we got to it was to ask for an item to be on the agenda at next meeting on how we proceed with the county manager. This is certainly an item that needs to be a discussion and action taken. We've already taken action in the past, so I think this is appropriate that we have an item on the agenda that's advertised, that we are able to have that discussion and take action on it. Since it's not on the agenda tonight as an action item, I'm not sure that'd be appropriate since all of our actions so far related to the county manager position has been action items. So that would be my recommendation, but I intended to ask the board to let's have a discussion at the next commission meeting on how we need to proceed, given where we're at today. We have received applicants. They have been narrowed down to for. And so I think we've got to do due diligence on following that process through as well. But I think it's worthy of a conversation at next meeting.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Anything else, Commissioner Roden?
That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Next up is Commissioner Anderson. Take it up.
I'm trying to get it off. I couldn't. If you hear somebody snoring, it's not me. It's my pet beagle behind me. He's been snoring the whole time I've been on the meeting. I don't know if y'all hear it or not. So, but anyway, the only thing I got a couple things. I agree with Commissioner Roden. I know that's something we're going to have brought before us in the next meeting, but I would agree that you can go through a crisis like we've been going through for the past month, and it was handled professionally as it could have been. I think sometimes the Lord allows things to happen to open people's eyes, and this might have been one of those things that happened that opened some eyes. So I'm gonna get off of that little fishing trip and go on and get on another one. I have a question on the Baker County Little League. They are wanting to have a season starting up on June 1st. Let me make sure I'm right before I take. Yes, they want to do a 4-week season starting on June 1st because these kids have been shut up in their houses and parents are going crazy. And they was they're in a meeting now, and I was just trying to see what the board felt about. I know we got to follow the CDC guidelines. I mean, that's going to be, and I've already expressed that. I think there needs to be some way we can actually look at this and then let these youngins get out and play some ball. If we have to restrict the parents, some of the parents, the moms and the dads might want to sit 6 foot apart from each other anyway when they're out there fighting during the game. But there's something I think we need to address. Looking at, I know my wife likes to sit away from me when we have those things. But so do you. Is that what you're saying, Sarah? She's raising her hand. She wouldn't want to sit by me neither. But anyway.
You're finished on that part.
Okay. But I think it's something we need to have a discussion here tonight about. I feel good and comfortable about it. We've opened up the parks. I know that we're still trying not to let a bunch of people gather together and socialize, but we got to let our kids play. I mean, they worked hard all year to do this, and the parents have spent a lot of money and effort and time in bringing their kids to all the practices, and I just hate for them to see them miss out on the whole season because of this virus. And there was no fault of the kids, no fault of the parents, no fault of anyone that's around that I know of. Maybe China, I don't know. I ain't got the end of that. But I'm not trying to put blame anywhere. I know that our kids need to be active. They can go to school. I mean, it's just terrible. And I just don't want, I think it's time for the commission to have this conversation. So I would just like to hear the opinions of each commissioner that we have here, if you don't mind, Mr. Chair.
I have one quick question. Do you know when the normal season typically starts?
Sometime in March, in late March, I think they have the opening day, and when we told them to shut down, they shut down. They didn't have any more games, and they're trying to decide now where they can just have a short season before the real hot summer comes in. Because when it gets out there in July, you're not going to be able to be out there and play ball. You can't expect those kids to do that.
Thank you, sir. I'd welcome other thoughts from other commissioners.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question or a comment, I should say, if I can have a moment.
Sure, Sarah, you go first.
Okay, so the Little League president did call me last week and let me know that the board of directors was going to meet tonight. And so I think it may be good. I would love to hear what your comments and your thoughts are. But what I would like to do is after they meet today, maybe tomorrow or one day this week, I'd like to sit down either or go over the phone or in a place where we can meet our social distancing requirements with the league president and our emergency management director, Ms. Beck Parker. And let us see if we could come up with some ways and some ideas. I'd like to hear what their thoughts are. I know they were getting some direction from the National League as well on how to make that happen. So I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it, but I think it would be a good idea to have that meeting with the Little League and emergency management on how we could make that effectively work and keep everyone safe.
I'd like to be at that meeting too, Sarah, if any way possible.
Yes, sir, of course.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other commissioner comments? Commissioner Roden, your hands are up. You are recognized.
Well, I'm hoping that with stage 3 might end at the end of May, hopefully, and we can have a little bit closer distance socializing. But I know that our kids want to play, their parents want to play. I mean, if we can do it, I would say yes. If it's possible and still be safe, I would say do it.
Thank you. Commissioner Steele, you're recognized.
Basically, I agree with the fact of what Commissioner Anderson. I think the thing is just basically we got to find out if everything goes back to where it should be. I'm in favor for, you know, if I'm not sure Commissioner Anderson, June 1st is, you know, definitely if that's the date, then I know there's talk about some of the major parks possibly opening up at a limited capacity. And I'm thinking that just like anything else, our world's changed, but the kids may have to sit a little farther apart in the dugout. But I think we can still play ball. But I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Commissioner Croft, you unmuted. Would you like to comment?
Yeah, I'm in favor of however the Little League wants to handle it. They obviously got a better grip on it than I do. And I think if it's possible to work it out, that could be a good.
Thank you, Commissioner Croft. Sarah, I think you kind of have the direction there that you need. What we would like to understand very clearly, and if you could bring that back to us by our next commission meeting on the steps that they're going to take to try to help control that. I would like to understand what they're doing at a national level as well, what they're recommending. But I think what you're hearing from the board is we're in favor of moving that, but to continue to monitor the guidelines and understand, make sure everybody understands what kind of protocols they're going to have in place as well in order to do that. I'll say Commissioner or Mr. Commando, come off of mute, or excuse me, off of screen freeze. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Rich?
No, sir. It's just every now and then my my internet connection lags, so it helps me to see everything.
Thank you, sir. Sarah, you have I think you have clear direction, correct?
I just have one other comment, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I just, when Sarah, when we're meeting with them, we just want to make sure, and I know what the national guidelines sometimes come down, and they give you this broad, big picture, you know, Miami-Dade, Jacksonville. We're not Jacksonville. We're not Miami-Dade. We're not, I mean, I deal with this stuff all the time in the legislative session over in Tallahassee. We're Baker County. And we also need to decide, have a little leadway of, you know, Baker County is not these big cities, and we're not all on top of each other like they are. So not always what you hear handed down from the top brass down to us small counties makes sense. So I think we need to be reasonable when we're making our decision on whether we can have ball or not. Just because, just a simple fact, you can't compare apples. I mean, we're not apples to apples. You know, Union County and Baker County is pretty close, but when you compare Baker County to Dade County or even Columbia County, we're not close. So I think we can use a lot of common sense and leeway on that also, if the commissioners sees it that way also.
Thanks, sir. Commissioner Anderson, I think the rest of the board feels the same way. Certainly don't try to apply everything that's being done other places here, but I think we just at least ought to consider the guidelines and let the league here take appropriate steps and actions. I think from the commission standpoint, we agree and allow our ball fields to be used for that purpose, but we just want them to use good, some good practices in recognition of the COVID-19. Okay. Anything else, Commissioner Anderson?
No, sir. I thank y'all for listening to me.
Thank you, sir. The next up I see to my right, in the top right of the Hollywood Squares, is Commissioner James Croft. You are up.
Thank you, sir. I have a question. Do we have anyone tonight on here with us from the health department or from Ms. Parker, any of her group?
Clint, you'll have to advise if we have anybody participating.
I do not see anyone listed in the attendees. If there's anyone that's there by phone, press *9 to raise your hand. And I see none.
Okay. I have a question that maybe Ms. Little can follow up on for us. I've been seeing press releases in Hamilton and I think Suwannee and a couple of counties that are, in our size range that they were doing walk-up testing. I think their local health department was, coordinating it. And I was just wondering if there was any move for that over here or what the status was on that. So I don't know if any of you have talked to anyone or know anything about it, but like I said, I've been seeing the releases and it was just interesting that it was coming to smaller counties like that. And the ones I saw made it sound like it was the health department doing that. The only other thing that I have is on a personal. I would like to thank the Board of Commissioners for beautiful flowers that were sent to my dad's funeral. And on behalf of our family, we appreciate the token of your condolence and compassion with the flowers and the prayers and just so many. This county is so good to folks when things happen, and so it made me proud to be a Baker County and all over again. So and I appreciate y'all's prayers and all very much so.
Thank you, Mr. Croft. And the last one of the Hollywood Squares is Commissioner Bobby Steele. You are up.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Commissioner Croft, again, and the prayers still with your family. Like I said, definitely sorry for your loss, and I know we all were thinking about you. I just wanted to, echo what Commissioner Roden and Commissioner Anderson also said. I don't know. I've been, I'm still considered a rookie because I'm not been on the board like some of the other commissioners, but the professionalism and talent that I've seen over the past couple months from Miss Sarah is something that I don't really know that we're going to find anywhere else. But so whatever was on the agenda next meeting, definitely I'm in support of making some kind of recommendation. So again, Commissioner Anderson, I hope I say play ball. Let's do it. And hopefully we can get back out of the house and start being a little bit normal. So just other than that, Mr. Chair, that's all I have for tonight. God bless all of you.
Thank you, sir. My last thing, I don't really have any other items that we haven't already covered, except for I do want to follow up for our next meeting. One of the things that I think we've got to continue to be cognizant of is how we run meetings. In the sense with COVID-19. And there are guidelines out there that's allowing us to start to release restrictions and come back and start to have people there. But there's still a strong encouragement for social distancing. I think we need to have a discussion at each meeting on how we proceed with the next meeting. I am going to recommend that we proceed one more meeting with virtual meetings because I don't believe yet the restrictions are lifted to a degree that we could truly have the public come in and sit in this meeting room. We can't sit up on this dais 6 feet apart and conduct business, meeting those recommendations. And I think we have to set an example of leadership and do what we're asking everybody else to do. And I don't think it'd be appropriate for us to try to meet again next meeting since we still have those social distancing practices in place. So that would be my suggestion, but I'd like to hear the feedback from the board on what your thoughts are.
As bad as I hate to say it, I think you're right. I think that one more meeting is not going to hurt anything. I think that our staff has done a tremendous job of the professionalism of the way this is all carried out. I think the chairman has done an outstanding job running these meetings. And I just want to say I appreciate the effort because this just don't happen. And I know that y'all have made this possible for this board. And I just want to thank everyone. I've thanked the chairman and I've thanked our county manager there, but I want to say thank you to the staff because I know that your staff is always the backbone of what you are. So I just want to say, hey, keep up the good work. Y'all making us look good. And that's kind of hard the way I look with me. So I appreciate that
motion. Mr. Roden, you're recognized.
Yeah, I'm in agreement too. I think one more time we need to at least go one more. And I do appreciate all the effort too. And Commissioner Bennett, you've done a great job of this Zoom business, because I guess you do it all the time, but you really have done a great job as chair of the meeting on here. And I appreciate what Sarah and Clint and all of our staff do too. So yeah, I mean, as bad as I hate it, let's go with it one more time, hopefully.
Thank you, Commissioner Roden, for the comments as well. Anything else, Commissioner Crawford, Commissioner Steele, anything? What's your thoughts?
I think it's better to be safe than sorry. And I think we still got, some unknowns out there at this point. So I definitely think we need one more meeting on this until we can get maybe a clearer picture of how things are working.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I know since you're a young guy, I don't want you getting us older folks infected. So, just I think we'll move one more time. So.
Thank you, sir. Let me say this. Our staff, Sarah and Clint they have done a phenomenal job, because when we say staff, we're talking about 2 or 3 people. Okay, we're talking about a very small group that has done this. And so let's be realistic. When we don't have this massive IT department, we don't have this huge support to pull this off. And I worked very closely with Sarah and Clint before the last meeting to get everything ready, and they were phenomenal to get it set up. And even since the last meeting, they've even continued to improve for us to understand how to use it. And we are streaming live on Facebook as we speak, okay? For a small county with the staff that we have, our team has done a phenomenal job. I will say, I think our meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, our last meeting, which was our very first virtual meeting, went off without a hitch. This one has gone very well. I have no concerns with that. We got started a couple minutes late, but listen, you can't always plan issues with technology. It's just part of it. And so one of the things I will say between Sarah helping with this and Clint and David, both of them working very hard to pull this off, is great. So with that being said, I did realize I have just about overlooked one additional item that was on the agenda. That was for public comments. As I said, we'd wrap back up with public comments. So before I close out, I'd like to make one last shout out to Sarah. Have you received any emails or a phone call in regards to any public comments?
I have, yes, sir. I would like to answer part of Commissioner Croft's comment that he asked about the drive up or the walk up testing sites. So right now the health department has opened up testing to our first responders. I had an email from earlier today. I don't have it in front of me now, but they had a significant amount. It's actually listed in the situation report from Ms. Beck Parker. If you guys have not seen that from her this evening, I would suggest looking at that. She gives you the breakdown on how many of our first responders have been to the health department since it opened to this just walk or drive through, testing. The date specific for the general public has not been released at this point from the local officials, but that is something that they're working towards. So as soon as we know when that date is, of course, we'll make that available to you all, but it is something that we're working towards. I wanted to share that with you. And at this time, I do have one public comment. I'm sorry, my screen's behind me. I'm going to read it real fast if you'll give me just one moment.
Please do so.
Okay, so I have one public comment that actually came in on our phone line from that's Miss Tiffany Suggs. And she is asking if the board would mind sharing their feelings about how and when salons can open, or if you've heard any news about that.
Thank you. I'll take the lead on that one. I think Commissioner Anderson said it very well last meeting, in that we are anxious to get our local businesses back functioning. I can assure you that I would support moving forward with opening as soon as the recommendations come out that it's safe to do so. I know everybody's getting very antsy. Our kids have been home from school. I've been working from home for 5 weeks. I returned today back to the office. We're gradually getting back there. But I'm going to offer a little bit of caution with jumping too fast. This is not over. It's not done. And I'm going to offer the suggestion that we remain very diligent in our actions, as well as that we remain very patient, but open as soon as we can. The commission itself did not establish any requirements that said thou shalt close. All right, this is something that's done by the governor and by the state. And so we're going to recognize that and would encourage them, as soon as they do allow it to open, then you do so. But I don't think it's appropriate for us to try to take any steps that's contradictory to the state, the governor. And if any other commissioners would like to comment, respond to that comment, you're welcome to do so.
I just have a short comment, Mr. Chairman. I actually was in Georgia this weekend, and they are allowing that in Georgia. And I thought it was pretty neat the way that they handled it. It's not like the government came out and just said, hey, this is how you're going to handle your salon. These ladies actually had face masks. They had hand sanitizer available, and you couldn't go in into the establishment without a face mask, without washing your hands with the sanitizer. And you had to stay in. This is what surprised me. You had to stay in your car. And then when it's time for you to get your hair cut, they would come out and get you. And then you had to be, of course, 6 foot from everyone. The only person you can't be 6 foot from was the lady cutting your hair. But she was actually cutting my hair, and she wore gloves. And I don't know how she done that. Does my hair look all right? But anyway, she used gloves, and she had a face shield on. I don't have much hair, so don't laugh. But either way, I thought it was very professional the way that she had handled herself, or her establishment had handled themselves, knowing that the issue is there. But I think it comes to a point when the Georgia governor seen where he knew that his people was bright enough to handle this on their own. They didn't need a government stepping in telling them the guidelines. They figured it out for themselves. And I'm thinking, without a doubt, when our governor, I'm thinking on the second phase, I really do. This is my personal opinion. It's not nothing that somebody's told me. But I think on the second phase, you'll start seeing that happening, because I'm thinking what a lot of these governors are doing is looking at the other governors and seeing what's going on. And what was happening in Georgia, I think, was very professional. And I felt very safe, and everything was clean. So I think that we just got to have more confidence in our people and let them do what they know do best, and that's to take care of themselves and to take care of other people. So that's what America's all about anyway, is taking care of everybody else. We all do it, and that's what makes it special. But I agree. I think we need to follow the governor. I think I'm hoping that his next recommendation is going to be to start opening up some of our small businesses like that, because they definitely need to get back to work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. All right. Commissioner Roden, your hand's raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just did want to respond to that, because I'm a former hairdresser, and I know exactly what she's going through, because if you're a hairdresser, you don't work, you don't get paid. Anyway, and hairdressers are probably some of the most sanitizing people. That business, I mean, the sanitizing requirements in that business is tremendous. And I feel like in the next go around, Tiffany, I feel like the governor probably will open up salons then, hopefully, but you want to be safe. You don't want to do something and then cause a problem for yourself or somebody else. So just hang in. I feel like in just a couple of weeks, you'll be back to work.
Thank you, Commissioner Roden. Anybody else have any comments on that before I move on? Sarah, was that the only email that you received? No phone calls. And Clint, can you advise if there's anybody raised their hands to chat or send a chat? I haven't seen a chat.
There is nothing else.
Thank you, sir. So that will give an opportunity for more public comments, and we have no further comments besides that one. We appreciate at least the public participating and receiving a comment there. So it does show that we can receive public input through this media as well. So thank you very much. With that being said, I'm prepared to close the meeting unless I see somebody's hand raising that they need to say something else before I do so. And since I don't see anybody doing it, let me express my appreciation to each one of you as well as for getting online in time for us to have these meetings. And it's running very well. Thank you for everybody's patience to work through these. Look forward to seeing you again in about 2 weeks. Have a great evening. This meeting is adjourned.